The Collaborative for Student Success is crisscrossing the country on the Route K-12 Exploring Education Recovery podcast to showcase how federal recovery funds are reshaping schools. Join Collaborative Director Jim Cowan as education commissioners, K-12 reporters, and advocates share how historic funding is accelerating learning and meeting the diverse needs of students. Catch up at edurecoveryhub.org or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This is EWA Radio, the podcast of the Education Writers Association. I'm public editor and your host, Kavita Kadoza. Many of you caught the journalism bug when you were students, maybe in high school or college, when you first felt the thrill of being able to question someone in authority or challenge the status quo, when you heard your voice on air for the first time or saw your byline in print, or after you uncovered an injustice in your school community and made a difference. After that, despite the challenges, you knew that journalism was what you wanted to do. Today's podcast is in honor of Student Press Freedom Day on February 23rd. It's an initiative by the Student Press Law Center, which raises awareness of the important work student journalists do, highlights how censorship threatens that work, and empowers students to fight back against attempts to take away their First Amendment rights. Education reporter Jessica Votipka with the Grand Island Independent in Nebraska wrote about such student censorship. Welcome to EWA Radio, Jessica.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Jessica, in your piece, you quoted the former Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, who called America's public schools the nurseries of democracy. And student newspapers play a critical role, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
We also have another guest, Marcus Pennell. He's now a freshman at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. But while this was going on, he was a senior and a journalist at the Viking Saga, a student newspaper of Northwest Public Schools. Welcome, Marcus.
Hi, glad to be here.
Administrators said the journalism and newspaper program was cut because the school board and superintendent are unhappy with the last issue's editorial content. I was quoting there. What were you writing about, Marcus?
So for that June issue, we kind of wanted it to be like a pride issue. You know, we wanted to write about LGBT topics and stories. And specifically, I wanted to write about how they were affecting me at school. But I think some of my peers wrote about like the history of the gay rights movement. And one wrote about like the science of sex and gender. So kind of just covering all those different areas.
Because it was Pride Month.
Yeah. And, we had faced some backlash previously about using our chosen names and pronouns. They restricted the use of our preferred names. So they were forcing us to use our birth names on our articles. So we kind of wanted to take a stand against the administration without putting our teacher at risk. Because, we were kind of told that was what the consequence would be.
Well, what was interesting was, Jessica, in your article, you quoted an administrator as saying, "Why do you think this is newsworthy?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kind of shocked when he said that. It's a pretty big issue, student press freedom and LGBTQ rights in general. Yeah, I was surprised.
This experience was also very personal for you, Marcus. You're a transgender man, and on your birth certificate, your first name is Megan. You found the name they had published with Megan as your byline. Can you tell me a little bit about that and also what dead naming is?
So sometimes when a trans person, starts beginning their process of transitioning, they, want to change a name to a name that matches kind of the traditional aesthetics of that gender, So like, for example, I was born a woman, so my name was Megan, but then I wanted something a little more masculine, so I went with Marcus. It's kind of different for everyone, though. Some people don't change their names. Some people change it to just something that means something to them. But, for me, it was a big deal because it was kind of like the art I was creating was being attributed to someone that didn't really exist. That's why it meant a lot to me.
Mm-hmm. Tell me what your reaction was when you saw Megan as your byline.
I wish I could say I was more surprised than I was, I knew a lot of people in my community weren't super accepting of a lot of LGBT stuff, but I'd really never expected it to bring the kind of controversy it did to my school. And of course, it hurt my feelings. It didn't make me feel good. Plus, when I have to send those things I've written to people, I have to explain why my dead name is there. And that's embarrassing for me. It's a lot.
Marcus, you taught me so much. You and all the kiddos at Northwest. I have, I grew up in a small town, graduated with 18 white kids. And it was just very eye-opening. You taught me so much, and I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot.
I don't think people understand how big a deal dead naming is,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like when Allison Gash explained it to me, it was like, oh my gosh,
Who is she?
Allison Gash, who is an associate professor at the University of Oregon, told me a lot about dead naming, and it really, really clarified some things to me, especially when paired with Marcus's experiences. I don't think people get what a big deal it is.
And it's such like a basic issue of respect.
It's a human right.
Yeah.
Call yourself what you want to.
Yeah. It's just surprising how many people will get it wrong or how many people will, not understand how big of a deal it is.
So, Jessica, tell me a little bit about how you heard about the story and just a quick synopsis of what had gone on until then.
Yeah, so I had been on a vacation. I think it was like the longest vacation I'd had in several years. I got to my desk, which looks like Office Depot exploded. And I looked, and on top of my pile of junk is this little note. And it had loopy handwriting on it in black ink, and I saved it. And it said it was from a parent, and it was an anonymous parent. And they said that the student newspaper journalism program had been canceled because of LGBTQ content. And they mentioned, that the saga had won tons of awards and been very successful. And I thought to myself, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I can't, this is not something that people should ignore. This isn't something that should fall through the cracks.
And the student newspaper was 54 years old.
Yeah. I mean, it was an institution, it'd been winning awards. It was very successful. But yeah, and it was kind of a fate thing too, because through some sleuthing, I figured out who the advisor for the saga was. And I found them on Facebook and reached out, found out that there had been an email sent to, I believe I'm not sure, our press room, because we have a printing area too, that Saga used to hire us to do their printing. The email somehow got lost because the staff member told me that they had sent an email and that I should see it. And I said, well, I didn't receive it. Who did you send it to? They mentioned, and I, went around the office. Do you remember this? Do you remember this? Do you remember this? And the kind of key phrase was in that email. Someone had saved it and it said canceled because of editorial content. And it was like, bingo.
Wow.
And from there, I talked to the advisor. They refused to go on the record just for reasons that are pretty obvious. So that gave me a lot to go with. It was kind of hard. Marcus was hard to convince to talk to me.
Let me ask him why. Marcus?
Yeah, Marcus,
are you like reporters who like asking questions and not answering them?
I don't know about that, but it would
it's hard to talk about. It's very personal. Do you know, and I'm sure you were thinking, do I really want this in the newspaper?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. To be totally honest, I wasn't really out to my family at all. So, it was a matter of, am I ready for them to find out?
Oh my
and
gosh.
they did.
Wow,
and,
I didn't know that, Marcus.
Yeah, but
crap.
it was like I said, I'm honored to be in the position I am of like an advocate for so many of these kids. Plus, I faced a lot of bullying at Northwest, so I didn't really want that to continue into my adult life.
How did all of you react in your newsroom when you heard about this?
So they actually didn't inform us of the saga's cancellation until the summer.
Oh my gosh, so they waited till the school year was over and then you heard about it?
Yeah, that's right.
So it was the summer, but how did everyone react, your fellow reporters and other classmates?
Kind of the same stuff, the ones that were in support were greatly in support. And, they were just, it was beyond belief for a lot of people. And I feel like even still for a lot of people, when they hear about it, they don't believe it. It's crazy.
Yeah, because you guys got some pretty icky reactions to your pride issue, didn't you?
Yeah.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
What reactions?
Honestly, I missed a lot of it because the seniors kind of get to graduate early, but, I heard stories from kids that were still there of kids saying they were going to burn the papers and, kids saying that, oh, like, this school, like, even if there are LGBT kids at Northwest, we're all still mostly normal. So we should have normal things in our, just stuff like that.
Jessica, well, first of all, I should say, before we get into like what you found out, this is not the first time that Nebraska school districts have tried to kind of censor student newspapers, right?
Yeah, it isn't.
In fact, one student press freedom group told you, given its size, we hear from Nebraska students and journalism advisors way more than we should. Give me some examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had several only in recent years. One was because a student wanted to attend a school board meeting, which seems pretty basic to me. Another student wanted to report on a Confederate flag in the
one sec. Oh. The student urged other students to attend school board meetings, and that was censored?
Right.
Why?
That's a good question. They were told that they should be attending student council meetings instead.
Oh my goodness. Okay, go on.
There were a few other examples recently. One was a student wanted to report on a Confederate flag that was in a school parking lot. Another one was about prior review, meaning, say Marcus writes an article.
Mm-hmm. Before
the article is published, then administrators can, I guess, kind of screen it, look it over, and if there's anything they don't like, they can censor it, essentially. Okay. It just blows my mind because the saga could have easily been missed. I mean, thank goodness for two things. Number one, that anonymous parents note and that email. If those two things hadn't been found, this would have gone on and nobody would have known about it.
Right. You have this wonderful quote in your piece where someone says, you can't censor something that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
So Marcus has talked about what classmates were saying. What did you find?
Like I said, it was hard to get some of the kiddos to talk. Marcus was easier than most of them. I did have one student come in who really, really got me. They came into the independent office and we sat down. And Marcus, I can't remember if you were with us that time, but they said they are so used to people telling them to kill themselves on social media and in the hallways. The response they say automatically is, "Can't you come up with something better?" And I can't imagine living my life like that, having to put up with that and having to live with it.
Oh my God, that is it's just awful for anyone. And I can't even imagine teenagers.
Yeah. And that student chose not to go on the record, but was very helpful in giving some direction. So, I mean, you can quote people, and even the people you don't quote, they give you some direction, you know?
Mm-hmm. This is another kind of key point of the importance of student journalism is that they are reflecting their school. And
yeah, for sure. And I think a big part of like why we wanted to do the June issue and everything, we wanted some of those kids who like weren't as connected as us to see that there were kids like them at our school. And there were kids, you know, at our school who wouldn't say that stuff to them and who were on their side. So
right. So tell me a little bit about the reaction to the story. I guess let's go with you first, Marcus. What was the reaction to the story about your stories?
Honestly, it was just so crazy. I think no one really expected it to get as big as it really did, you know, to have like national media attention and all these, you know, all these outlets reporting on our little school in Grand Island. But it was awesome. You know, just like Jessica said, you wonder how many sagas like how many of these situations go unnoticed? And I was just so thankful that ours wasn't. We all felt pretty hopeless, but we started to gain a lot of it back from the story and the support we've been getting from so many people.
And Jessica, what was the reaction to your story from your point of view?
I was really surprised. On one level, I had a renewed positive sense of humanity because I had people calling my office phone saying, wonderful article. Thank you for supporting. People on Facebook were really cool and social. I did have some backlash. I did have some school officials contact our office and say some things. But, I think it was just...
When you say some things, they were not happy, I take it.
No. They didn't directly reference the article, I don't believe.
But that's a very old trick that we... It
is.
Right? Calling someone's boss to try and intimidate. Okay. What else?
I think overall it was just... I felt like it was really positive. And I guess I just delivered the message.
One of the things I loved, like your piece was so brilliant because it was so simple. You did what a reporter does, right? You were hearing all these things and you dug in and you interviewed people from just a variety of organizations like the Nebraska Press Association, the ACLU, the Student Press Center, the University of Nebraska. Like you were listening to what people said and then you were finding out the facts. And it was interesting when someone said, like, why is this newsworthy? And you had this whole paragraph on the legal precedent that allows news organizations to decide on their own what they consider newsworthy. It was like so airtight.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll never be able to thank you enough for that, Jessica. Oh, you knocked it out of the park.
Well, I couldn't have done it without you. That's for damn sure.
I was thinking this is like highlights the importance of regular newspapers where, sometimes a story may not get the attention it deserves. And this is a way journalists amplify important issues. So tell me a little bit, you had talked about New Voices Law. Tell me a little bit about what that is.
Basically, it's a law that ensures students have freedom of the press, that they can't be censored through like we talked about, prior review, things like that. Just basics, basic First Amendment rights for student journalists.
So I understand some states have adopted this law or laws that are similar, but Nebraska hasn't, is it?
Yes, that's true.
So what happened next? I'm hoping there's a feel-good end to the story, that the Saga student newspaper has suddenly kind of resurrected and is still publishing.
Well, I actually heard from a faculty member a few months ago, I think it was, that they were going to bring the Saga back in digital form. Right before this started recording, I texted that person and asked if it was published, and they said it has not been published online yet.
Marcus, how do you feel about that?
It's pretty complicated. I have pretty complicated feelings about, the whole thing, obviously. But, obviously it was wonderful to hear that it's coming back. But of course, there are certain caveats to that, which I wasn't too excited to hear about, like the online format. And they actually replaced the advisor, with seemingly no reason, kind of like how they shut it down with seemingly no reason. So,
Jessica, let me ask you, what do you think people don't understand about student journalists?
I think people don't understand that student journalists take what they do very seriously. They're not just out to write about... school dances are important to students, to be sure, but there are other things that student journalists are passionate about that can change their fellow students' lives. And I think people don't get that. I think, they think, oh, student newspaper, yearbook, whatever, it's nice. It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter.
And some of them have broken really, really important stories in their schools that no one else would know about.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of people forget, a lot of seniors in high school can vote. A lot of people want to write off high schoolers as kids, but kind of like Jessica said, we're getting to be adults. It's time to start thinking about these serious topics.
It sort of gives a portrait to the community of what is going on in a school. Taxpayers, parents. If you want to know what's going on in the school, ideally, you look at student publications.
Mm-hmm. When I covered local school districts, I used to read the local student newspapers.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes those students that work there are wonderful sources. I did a story recently at a different school district in the same town. And those students that I met through the newspaper and through other, secondhand, firsthand, have been indispensable. They have been just wonderful to have, because you have to include the student voice. How can you write about schools without talking about students? And I think that's kind of one of the things I like about education reporting. I like writing human interest, and there's nothing that has more human interest than education. I mean, at its core, it's about people.
Marcus, what advice would you give other student journalists who find themselves in the same spot?
I would say just keep writing and just keep creating, even if, no matter who tries to stop you. Also, to a lot of queer students, I would say keep being yourself too, obviously. Don't let any of that bullying change you or affect you deeply. And of course, don't let it affect the way you write at all too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, in addition to that, I would tell student journalists, don't be afraid to reach out to the professional journalists. We are here for you. We want to encourage you. You're important. You're going to be us someday, probably better. And, if you need something, if you are being censored, if you feel like you're not being listened to, please tell us.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's kind of a natural relationship between education journalists and student journalists.
True. I kind of went mother hen on this one.
I'm glad.
I want to give you both the last thought. So what is the one thing you took from this experience? And I don't mean like you took through the next day or the next week or the next month. I mean something that you think will stay with you forever.
For me, this is pretty hyper specific to me, but I think it's that it's really taught me a lot about how to love myself as an LGBT person, and how to heal from a lot of the stuff I faced in high school. That's definitely been the biggest thing for me. And I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional.
Are you crying? Because I'm crying.
When I started realizing I was queer and trans and all that, I really thought it was gonna affect me negatively so much, way more than it could ever positively. But just from this experience, I've received so much support from people I never expected and who I never even would even tell I was queer in the first place. So many of my aunts and uncles actually reached out to me and were supportive, and even my pastor at my parents' church was supportive. So that's definitely, a big thing that I've been learning is self-love and stuff like that.
I have to say, Marcus, we're so proud that you felt safe enough to tell your story and share it with others. And we're very proud of you as a reporter. And we can't wait until you're a full-time journalist when you graduate.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited. It's crazy. I thought being queer would shut a lot of doors for me, but it really hasn't. And that's been a great lesson to learn from all this.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And what about you, Jessica?
It's made me a better person, for sure. And it's made me a better journalist. I got to really dig in, and that is my favorite type of story. I do not like to do fluff. I like stuff like this. I am so passionate about this story, and it gave me confidence. I love connecting with people, and I'll tell you why. I definitely connected with Marcus and those students and everyone in this story.
We've been talking with Jessica Votipka, who's a reporter for the Grand Island Independent in Nebraska, and Marcus Pennell, a freshman at the University of Nebraska and a student journalist. You can follow Jessica on Twitter at @GI_Jessica, and Marcus, who's on Instagram. His handle is Jazz for Late Nights. Thank you both so much for making time to chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That wraps up this episode of EWA Radio. I'm Kavita Cardoza. Do you have any questions for Jessica or Marcus? Let's continue the conversation. And if you'd like to learn more about how to support student journalists, you can find that information at the Student Press Law Center website. Special thanks to Angelina Liu and Kristan Obang from EWA and Raul Garcia for production assistance. The mission of the Education Writers Association is to strengthen the community of education journalists and improve the quality of education coverage. For more than 75 years, EWA has helped reporters get the story right. Thanks for listening and lifting up education journalism. The Collaborative for Student Success is crisscrossing the country on the Route K-12 Exploring Education Recovery podcast to showcase how federal recovery funds are reshaping schools. Join Collaborative Director Jim Cowan as education commissioners, K-12 reporters, and advocates share how historic funding is accelerating learning and meeting the diverse needs of students. Catch up at edurecoveryhub.org or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.